Hello, everyone. We will be starting really soon. We're just waiting for our panel to log on. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Great. Just hoping everyone logs on. Wayne. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Ani is on. All right, we're slowly getting here. I think we're just waiting on Nyla and Chris. Here is Nyla. Hi.
Hi, I'm Nyla.
Hi, Nyla.
Hey, Nyla. How are you?
Hey, Wayne. Long time no see. How are you?
Right?
Kristen, we made it.
I know, right?
I think we are waiting on Chris, and last I checked, he did not register yet. So let me know if you want me to go ahead and get started, or if you'd like me to wait for him.
So
give
for
him
the
one
record,
more minute.
I never registered, so I don't know how that worked, but there was never a button that says register. I just signed in with created a account, not even a profile. So
Okay.
I know.
All right. And then Kat, just let me know when you need me to share so I can do the presentation.
Yeah. You can just give me the go. I'll just do a quick introduction, and then I'll toss it over to you, and then I will log off, and it's all yours.
Okay, sounds good. You can go ahead and get started.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to do a roll call. We started doing it. I want everyone to kind of put where they are dialing in from and what school they're attending. And also just big ups to NetApp for joining us today. My name is Kathleen Murto, and I am part of the URX community. URX is a community of early talent professionals, and we get together and share best practices with one another. And we are excited to be hosting this session today. So I'm going to kick it off to Kristen. And as soon as I log off, you're able to share your screen.
Cool. Awesome. It's so nice to meet all of you. And thanks so much for the intro, Kathy. I appreciate it. All right, I am going to attempt to share my screen, so bear with me. All right. Perfect. Let me just head back. Awesome. Can everybody see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Let's see. Try one more time. All right. Let's see. I love technical difficulties. They're my favorite.
Kristen, it looks like I can see it slightly, but it just looks like a bunch of tabs and then a black screen is what I'm looking at.
Oh, of course. Yeah, it says my PowerPoint is all of a sudden not responding. Well, okay. Give me one more second. I'm going to try and just see if I can close this really quick and have it come back. In the meantime, thank you guys for all joining us today. I wanted to start off by just doing a quick introduction of everyone and just letting you guys know exactly what our agenda is today. We are going to be going through a few tips and tricks for mastering a technical interview, and I have these wonderful panelists that are going to assist me with that. So while I try and get this started, as far as sharing the screen, if everyone can just go through and introduce themselves really quick, and I will get back to working on the presentation.
Any particular order?
You spoke first, Nayla, so I'm going to have you start.
I guess it's me. Hi, everyone. I'm Naila Nassif. I'm a senior engineering manager, research and development at NetApp. NetApp is a data storage and management company. My team and I are responsible for developing and delivering the performance of the products that NetApp produces. I'll pause here.
All right, shall I go next? Hi, everyone. My name is Wayne Booth. I'm a director of software engineering at NetApp. My organization is in charge of developing storage products and QA of those products as well. So, Lisa, you want to go next?
Yes, awesome. Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, my name is Lisa Conley. I'm a solutions engineer based out of Atlanta, Georgia. So what my role entails is being the technical resource on the sales call. So I cover all products, but really focus on our core product portfolio. Then Annie can take it from there.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Zara. I'm in a similar role to Lisa. I'm a cloud solutions architect. I work on our Azure team. So I'm dedicated to this particular Microsoft service that NetApp co-sells, or excuse me, co-engineered. And our team is responsible for owning that relationship with Microsoft.
About that, forgot I was on mute. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try and reshare this now that I have it back open.
Hey, and I guess I'll, and while we're still doing introductions, my name is Chris Nelson. I'm an automation engineer at NetApp. I work on our biggest product is probably ONTAP, the operating system. It runs on top of the hardware, and now it's running in pretty much every other environment. And so I help develop tools that streamline our CI/CD pipeline and enable developers and testers to automate every portion of their workflows. And I've been with NetApp, I think, about 7 years now.
Perfect. All right. So I am just going to move forward with the first question, since this is just not my forte today. First question that I have for everyone was, what are common interview questions that you typically ask or have been asked in a technical interview? So, Amy, why don't we start with you?
And it's been a few years since I've interviewed, so bear with me. But one interesting interview question that I've gotten is mainly around problem solving. So I have XYZ problem. What steps am I going to take to address that problem? And the main goal of that type of question is to understand what kind of questions are you asking in return to gather additional information? What are the steps that you're taking to really hone down on the core problem and really understand it before we jump to trying to solve it or provide a resolution?
Adds on to that. It's a lot of questions that I've been asked. So luckily I was an intern at NetApp 3 years ago. Then I joined full time 2 years ago, and I've interviewed for a new role a year ago. So I've gone through plenty of interviews, and I've interviewed some folks myself. So I've been through a ton of these. And in my role, although it is a technical role, it's also very focused on sales and the soft skills. So one of the biggest things that I like to focus on when I'm interviewing someone else, and I've been asked many times, are situational questions. So talk to me about a situation in which you've experienced pressure or stress. And a lot of times, when I was first asked a question like that, I was thrown off, and I started answering it in the way of, oh, well, what I would do in a stressful situation. And they stopped me and said, no, tell me about a specific situation. So, for example, I had a priority one case this week with my customer, and I had to stay up late and talk to them and talk them off a ledge. And it gives you a chance to really explain a real life situation where you've faced struggles and overcome those challenges, like Annie was saying. But it also gives the interviewer a kind of a glimpse into who you are as a person and how you handle certain situations. So the situational type questions come up a lot, challenges, stress, pressure, any type of obstacle that you've experienced in a group setting or an individual setting. All great questions, and probably questions that will come up in any type of interview, but especially a technical interview.
Yeah, just to build on what Lisa said here a little bit, and Amy, the type of questions that we like to ask and that I've been asked in the past stem not only on the technical aspects, and it really is more of a behavior-based interview that we like to do, at least in my organization. Tell us about a project that you worked on, and a lot of times I like to actually throw in the twist that tell me about one that didn't go quite how it had planned, and then walk through how you dealt with the difficulties, how the project ultimately turned out. And a slight twist on that is also, hey, you were working with teammates. Where was a situation where maybe one of your teammates wasn't pulling their weight, or you were disagreeing on designs, things like that. So it's really, these technical questions are both looking for knowledge of the area, that languages, things like that, but just as much on teamwork and personality. So
I'll go next. I have two typical questions. I always ask variations on them. And they're all coming from what we look for in a candidate in my organization. We look for technical depth, we look for technical breadth, and we look for the ability to interact with other teams members on project. So for the first two ones, technical breadth and depth, I asked a multi-part question. I stated slowly, but I'm testing the ability of the candidate to take note and see the different parts I'm looking for, and basically say, think of the most complex problem you solved. Tell me what the problem was. Tell me what you did about it. Tell me what the result was. And this is the introduction to that question, and this could go on for a 20-minute conversation, because that part is testing their ability to notice the multi-part and to articulate first what the problem was and clearly define it, and then go deeper into what they did about it. And then that opens up a lot of back and forth questions about the depth of the technology and the depth of the solution they applied. And so that's the technical depth and breadth. The typical question I ask about team interactions is similar to Lisa's question, very specific. Think of a situation where you had to deal with a difficult situation or a difficult person, and think of difficult however way you want. Tell me what the difficulty was. Tell me what you did about it. There is no right or wrong answer. I'm just looking for a candid feedback on how they handle a difficulty, however they define it, and then how they would handle it. It's usually in the context of an interaction with a person, with a team, with a deadline, and all of these are valid situations on the job. I'm looking for how they handle them.
Yeah, and I think the common theme you've heard from everyone here is basically communication is extremely important. And I know most of our audience are probably in school right now with a computer science, some sort of engineering degree. And especially in engineering and software engineering, communication is huge. So being able to work with other people and explain your point of view and hear others' point of view and be able to interpolate what they're actually asking is extremely important. And so if you do more than a couple interviews, you'll probably experience this where you'll say that interviewer had no idea what he or she was doing. And so not all interviewers are perfect either. Like, this communication thing is pretty systemic throughout engineering. And so you need to be able to work with folks like this to be able to accurately articulate yourself. So the soft skills are extremely important, and especially when you only get, this interview window into how you will perform as an employee.
Awesome. Completely agree. I do see that we had a question in the chat in regards to, what if I don't have a lot of experience and I don't have a story that necessarily fits in well with the prompt? Does anyone want to take a swing at that? Because I know personally what my answer would be as far as a recruiter. I would say you have experience because you're in school. You've either worked a job that's not necessarily in the field that you're trying to be in yet, whether that's retail, customer service, or anything of that sort, or you had a group project at school as well that you may have encountered someone who either didn't want to do everything they were assigned on the project, or if you found yourself just at the head of the project trying to delegate tasks to everyone else. So in some shape or form, whether or not it's from an intern experience or previous work experience, I think that there's something that you can grasp onto to be able to explain and answer some of these questions. Anybody else have any other advice?
Yeah, and I think you can even take experience from your personal life. Let's say you haven't, experienced that. Maybe you're younger in school, or maybe, a lot of people now are taking a different path, taking trainings instead of going to school. So I've had people oftentimes relate back to their personal life, planning a trip with a group of friends. You can't always come to the same conclusion. It doesn't have to be a project that you do in school or a project that you're working on an internship, as long as you relate it to some sort of aspect of your personal life and relate it to a specific situation and how you came to, a successful conclusion, a successful end result. It doesn't really matter what the beginning was, what the problem was, as long as you talk about the process and how you got to that end goal and you were successful with it. I don't think it really matters what the situation around it is. It could be your personal life.
I'll piggyback off of that, and this is up that most of I've done a lot of interviewing in the past 5 years, our group has 1 to 2 interns and a new college grad almost every year. And I was an intern and a new college grad, and obviously I'm in the engineering side. But from a technical perspective, if you feel like you don't have experience, the first thing you need to do is you need to go contribute to open source software. It is free and it is easy, and there is a community, and there are so many people who want so much help. And you need to put your GitHub link at the top of your resume. So you need to go find ways to get engaged with people who are actively looking for help. The second thing is I've noticed a lot of resumes for folks I've worked with, when they feel like they don't have the experience, they say I have experience with Python, or I have experience doing software development. Just stop that experience with. You are a software engineer. You are a project manager. You are a business analyst. And then work from there, because there are other folks that are in your position and they're no more experienced than you. They just may be able to present things a little differently. So assert that you are a software engineer if you're looking for a software engineering position. And I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. I see another question that has come up. It's a great question. How does one go about highlighting how does one go about highlighting that despite having a direct line of communication with the person creating the challenges in the project, it was just a mismatch of passion for the project, and we had to let the person go and replace with someone else whose vision was aligned with ours? Is this seen as a failure?
I'll take that. I'd love to hear someone tell me that this was a difficult situation they dealt with, because there's a lot in there to share. I would ask, how did you recognize that this was a challenge? How did you communicate amongst yourself about brainstorm a solution for it? How did you present the decision to the person that you are asking to leave? All of these show a lot of creative thinking, a lot of courage to do the right thing, a lot of good communication, many, many, many soft skills that are very necessary for success on the job. So how this was handled is very good to describe and to showcase the skills that went into solving that problem. So this is a great story, and definitely not a failure. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I have to agree with Nyla. It's definitely not a failure. I've had numerous instances in my management career where I've actually had to go to very technically brilliant people and basically communicate the fact that if you can't work well with the rest of the team, you're not really of any value. And they had to kind of get them realigned with folks, because they just always wanted their way. It comes back to I think it was Chris that was talking about, or Nyla's listening skills and being able to work together and compromise or come up with a solution. And demanding your own way each time, isn't usually the way to be successful in the long term. So I would definitely look at something like that as a great learning opportunity, not a failure.
Awesome. Another question that I've gotten before, and speaking with interns and such, is that what types of programming languages do you look for? So I guess this is more geared toward Nyla and Wayne. What types of programming languages do you typically look for when you're interviewing as a hiring manager? And what if they don't have experience in that particular language?
I can take that. So the first thing, of course, we're all looking for you to know every single language on the planet, right? We want the best candidates. But the truth is, we only need deep experience in maybe one. So this is where like a cover letter comes in extremely handy, and you need to tailor your interview and your research to what the job title is asking for. So maybe your resume says, Python, Java, C, and shell languages. But if the position you're looking for is strictly in C, and all you have listed in your projects are stuff in Java, then you need to perhaps have a cover letter or modify your resume or really hit home the points that you understand and know C. So it's not necessarily knowing all these languages as much as going and knowing what the interviewers are looking for and then tailoring your answers to that. Because to be very honest, I've been, a full-time engineer at NetApp for maybe 5-6 years now. Like, I don't know Go, but I guarantee you I could learn it in a week. Like it's just another tool, and I understand the principles behind it. And I would feel comfortable going and interviewing for a position in Go. I would spend a week working on it, and then I would tailor my interview towards what they're looking for.
And Chris brought up a very important point. You need to demonstrate the interest, the willingness, and the ability to learn. So if you come in with one set of with a strength in one language, but you're hung up on only using that language, then that's not going to inspire me to trust that you're going to learn things related to that and apply them in our environment.
Maybe a last follow-up question just to that. Are you okay if someone, for example, on a coding question says, hey, I feel better coding in Java than I do in C for the answer to this problem? Is that okay? Can I move forward with that answer? And so forth.
Say yes, and specifically for programming questions in your interview, that's where, again, the communication piece is key. Like, if I can't program a hello world, reverse this string with you in 15 minutes, there's no way I'll be able to debug an issue on Friday night at 7 p.m. So communicate, make sure you know exactly the constraints, talk with them, and ask, are they concerned more about the logic and the understanding, and you can use whatever language you want, or do they actually want this to compile and they're going to care about syntax errors and stuff like that? So personally, when I ask programming questions, I let the interviewer write in whatever language they're most comfortable with. I can let them, write in just comment blocks if they want. So again, it's the back and forth and working with an interviewer and getting your ideas onto a whiteboard, paper, something, and just communicating with the interviewer.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. What we do in our organization is very similar. If we actually ask coding questions, right, which is, again, we tend to do more behavioral-based interviews, these situational items, but when it comes down to, does someone understand the basic constructs and pieces of the language? A lot of the languages have very similar pieces, they're just put together differently. So if they can articulate that in the language they're familiar with, it's usually fine. I'm not looking for the compile is what I'm getting at. So.
And even if you do feel out of your element, the person who's giving you the programming question, if they're with you, they are probably looking for you to work with them to create a solution. So
absolutely
treat it as a learning chance. Work with them, ask a million questions, get them to work with you, write stuff in comments, fill stuff in later. Just put your pen down on the paper and just start writing and just start asking questions.
Yeah, Chris brings up a really good point of things I've seen in some interviews where the initial question is left specifically vague in order to have you provide or reach back out with clarifying questions and clarify the problem down and then start working on the solution, right? Without the clarification, then it becomes much harder to move forward.
Sorry, that's my excited face because Amy is.
It should be. I can see your screen.
And there's a screen share. All right, if you can just move forward, I think one more slide. Perfect. Awesome. So another question that we can is, what are 1 to 2 pieces of advice that you wish you knew before working at NetApp career? It could be something specific to your role or team, or something more general, such as company culture, etc. Annie, can I have you start?
Yep, sorry, I was on mute there. Ooh, that's a really good question. I gotta think about that one for a second. I think the first advice I would give myself, and I didn't learn this until like a year in, is be willing to adapt, be willing to change, embrace change, especially in the tech space. Technology is ever changing, and you have to continuously upskill to really, stay sharp and stay with the industry trends, stay with the company trends. Especially at NetApp, we've been going through this really big, transformation internally. So I think a year ago I would have told myself to and embrace change. And the other piece of advice would be to always raise your hand and ask for help, especially as a junior engineer or junior employee. Especially at NetApp with our culture, people are always willing to help, but you have to be eager. You have to want to ask for that help, and people are usually willing to jump in because you're so willing to learn.
Awesome. Lisa? Oh, sorry, Chris.
Going right back to that, I think what Amy's asking for help, I think one of the biggest things you can do, no matter what company you go to, find a mentor, right? You're going to have a buddy that's on your team that is going to help you with stuff like, where's the break room? How do I submit this code? How do I get a calendar invite? And then you need somebody who's outside of your group, who doesn't report to the same manager or even director, that can give you perspective on things like, hey, I want to take Friday off this week and it's Thursday. Is that okay to ask? My manager has been canceling our one-on-ones this week. Is that okay? You really need somebody outside of your group that you can ask very candid questions about the culture, where you're going, and because their work doesn't depend on your work in any way, they'll be much more likely to have a level-headed perspective about what you're going. So I really echo what Amy said. Another two things that I could definitely hammer into everyone here before you go on interviewing is, one, have a story. Like, you are unique. You have a story. It is not like anyone else's. And there are certain things that you are interested in and that make you different from everyone. You need to know them. Me personally, I am very passionate about communication, about testing, documentation, following best practice, and having everyone cross training, having people work on different projects. So that's my story. So make sure that you have your story and you can present that well. And then the last thing is, if everyone here isn't very well aware of what imposter syndrome is, you need to Google it and you need to become very, very cognizant of that, okay? And just because you're starting and you're working with people who have been there for a year, you think that they're doing everything correctly and that you're the one that's the imposter and that you have no idea what you're doing. Everyone feels that way, and that feeling will change. So just be aware of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Sorry, go ahead, Nyla.
Yeah, thank you. I'll add also a wonderful point. I'll add another thing is, as you are being interviewed for a position, you are also interviewing the team and the company. And so you owe it to yourself to research the company, to understand what they do, to ask a lot of probing questions to the team members that will satisfy you at the end of the day if you end up taking that position, knowing that this is a team you want to be part of. This is a engineering product organization, if you choose to be in engineering, that you want to be part of. And so it's a two-way interview. And the more you candidly share, to Krista's point about your strength and your passion, the more you're revealing your abilities, but you're also signaling to the other organization that this is what you stand for, and you're looking for something similar as well. So it makes a better and stronger match that way, because it's a two-way interview.
Yeah, and I just want to continue on a couple of things that Chris mentioned, the imposter syndrome. I mean, for me, being an intern so recently, being a new hire, recent grad so recently, it's true, but they're hiring us for a reason. I mean, they want new opinions, they want new views, they want variety, they want diversity. So they're hiring us for a reason. So you kind of have to stick with that. And when Chris mentioned passions, that was my biggest piece of advice is figure out what you're passionate about and stick with it, because you can integrate it with whatever you're doing. I was a computer science in college, and my path isn't typically the path that a lot of computer science majors would take, but I just stayed open and I stayed what I was passionate about, and perfect place for me. And maybe it took a while and took an alternative path, but the only way that I could have done it, and I'm so glad that I figured this out after my internship, was staying open, staying very willing and open to talk to a lot of different groups, a lot of different people, but more importantly, sticking to what I'm passionate about. For me, Chris mentioned automation. I'm really, really focused on Ansible. I love some of the certain emerging technologies, and I found that was better suited in a different role versus software engineering. And that's just the way that my path took me. So stay open and stick to what you're passionate about. Find that one thing, whether it's the one coding language, like Chris said, whatever's behind it is what they're worried about. The logic behind it, the thought process behind it. You can learn anything. Your attitude and what you're passionate about is so much more impactful than the aptitude, because obviously if you guys are all interns, you're all willing and able and excited to learn. It's more about your attitude and where you fit into the team.
Speaking of paths, we did get another question about the difference between a solutions engineer and a software engineer. So Lisa, can you say a little bit more, and Amy as well, since you're a architect, can you talk a little bit more about how your position is a little bit different than a typical software engineer role?
Yeah, absolutely. So the typical software engineering is you're coding, you're developing, you're testing. Chris mentioned he works on CI/CD pipeline. You're really hands-on with the product. Whereas me, I'm more on the sales side of the house. So I'm actually working directly with the customers. Now, I still have those technical pieces. I have that technical background, and my role in the sales cycle is to be that technical resource. So when a customer comes to me with a challenge, Annie and I are the people on my side. I typically focus on core. Annie's a little bit more focused on Azure and the cloud, but we focus on the solutions to the customer. So in terms of how do we take what engineering has already done, the features, the products, all of these solutions that they've worked so hard on, how do we take those things and help the customer come, face their challenges and come to the proper solution. So we're, just the technical resource, answering technical questions, customer facing, whereas the engineers are more boots on the ground doing all the hard work.
Yeah, I think Lisa really nailed it. I mean, those are the key differences. And we're basically just taking this amazing software, this amazing product that you've built, and translating that into business challenges it's going to address for our customers. And we work, directly with customers, very sales function. Our role, at most other companies or in the industry is referred to as sales engineer. So that's similar role. I think solutions engineer, that term can kind of throw people off and cause some confusion, but that's pretty much what we're doing here at NetApp as a solutions architect or a solutions engineer on the pre-sales side. And we work cross-functionally, right? Every now and then with the product team or with the support teams, like Lisa was mentioning, with the escalation that she was dealing with. So we work cross-functionally, but yeah, our number one focus is the customer.
Is good with university recruiting because I've worked with them intimately on labeling these job titles appropriately. Do not assume when you interview for other companies that they know what a solutions engineer or a software engineer or a whatever engineer is. Make sure you read the job description, and whatever they call that job description, work with that. So a solutions engineer here is not a solutions engineer at other companies, and make sure you're aware of that.
Agreed. Yeah. And that in and of itself has changed the title quite a few times. It can be pre-sales engineer, sales engineer, systems engineer. There's a lot of different terms. So that's a really good point, is try to figure out what you're actually interviewing for. Like Nyla said, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So make sure it's a good fit both ways.
Totally agree. Another question that we had was, what common mistakes have you noticed that junior engineers often do?
I like that one. It caught my attention. I presume they do it during the interview process, and I see many of those. And I'll maybe bring up one or two. One is typically throw a lot of technical detail and it's just maybe out of nervousness, things that are not coherently connected together, just in an attempt to show that they know something and it's not meant to match the answer, the question, or whatever. So usually, I mean, I presume usually interviewers are trying to help the candidate. I do want to help them, and I say, let's not get into the detail yet. Let's talk about what you're trying to solve. The second mistake some then do is assume that I'm not following the technical detail, and then they go very vague. And I say, no, I can follow. I have a PhD in computer architecture. Let's get back to the detail, but I want to hear the problem first. I want to hear a summary statement first, and then I'll guide you into what I'm doing. So, bottom line, assumption. Making assumptions about how technical the person is or how unable to follow technology the person is. And those both can be very, very detrimental. You have to gauge the person who's talking to you and gradually match their level. And then they'll guide you, and then you can go deeper and deeper and deeper as needed. But don't make an assumption of where they're coming from and what they are. You can ask about their level of interest, for example, in depth versus breadth. So assumptions, not good.
Right. Just to leverage off of something Chris was saying, earlier, as you're engaged in these questions, it's okay to ask clarifying questions before providing the answer. And kind of another view on that that Nyla mentioned is it's actually on my list of things I wanted to bring up was, don't feel you have to answer just immediately, right? Dead air during any conversation can become uncomfortable. And actually, sometimes it's a really good tool as an interviewer, to let there be dead air and just let that go. But as an interviewee, if you try to come in and speak too fast, it's not well organized, that shows through. So take a moment, think about, what the interview is asking. What is the problem? And then what is how did you approach it and how did you work through it? Then you come across much more thoughtful and put together. So that's probably one of the biggest things is take time to answer the questions. Don't feel you have to immediately respond.
And I think also, especially for interviewing, right? Like the difference between school and job is that the actual customers, like in school, you tend to skip past the requirement piece of what you actually need because you just ask the TA or you ask the professor and it's there. And they've been building the same thing for semesters on semesters. But I mean, just because somebody says they need to build something that has two wheels and handlebars means that it needs to be a bicycle. They may want a motorcycle. So you need to ask those clarifying questions. You need to make sure that you're solving the problem that the customer, or in this particular instance, the interviewer actually wants you to solve. And like Wayne said, they oftentimes purposely leave it vague so that you ask clarifying questions. And I know that a lot of you are good at what you do because you're down in the details, right? But make sure that you don't get lost there and that you can pull yourself out and get 10,000 feet.
Another question I had been asked before was, now that everything is in a completely virtual world, what are some things that candidates can do to stand out, either in the applying process and after the interview, if you made it to the final round? What would you recommend for candidates at this point?
There, I'll fill it in. One idea is to use after the interview as an opportunity to elaborate or clarify something that maybe you did not ace in the interview. So maybe you misunderstood a question and then it just went away. And then you can say, yeah, I'm thinking about the point you made and I'm really passionate. And here's why, and here's what I've done about it in the past. I did not get a chance to share that with you. So using the after the interview as an opportunity to reach out We can still reach out virtually and share or fill in gaps or emphasize the match, the passion, what you see is the good opportunity to highlight that maybe you are the better candidate in the group.
I love that so much. I mean, obviously sending a thank you after an interview is super important, but go a step beyond that. Ask them a question, make them engage with you to continue that conversation. And, don't leave the interview open-ended, like, hey, I hope to hear from you soon, or I'll wait until you reach out, kind of assume the close, ask, there's a lot of different ways to end an interview. One of my favorites was that always, I got pretty good success with in making me stand out was, is there any reason that you wouldn't hire me right now? Or is there any hesitations that you have with me? There's certain things, and if they say no, great. If they say yes, then you learn the next time. Either answer is good because you're either learning and continuing to grow, or you feel very confident leaving. And the thank you follow-up question is a great idea.
Just thinking about.
Oh, sorry, Wayne.
Oh, I was just, thinking about today's environment with COVID-19, interviews being virtual. It's probably maybe a bigger deal for me, maybe since I've been in the industry for quite a while. But all of my interviews have basically been in person, right? So any of the virtual interviews, as an interviewer or interviewee, I would strongly suggest to make sure the cameras are on. I'm pretty good with, I like to see the body language. I like to see how people react to questions, things like that. That's one of the bigger things. I would just make sure that in this environment, cameras are on and you're being as transparent as possible on both sides.
Be patient with the interviewers because there's a culture that's being completely torn down of you're not in the office, you're not working. That's going on with all this, and nobody's really done in like virtual interviews, right? Like a lot of my teammates don't do phone screens or resume screens; they only do the in-person interviews, and now they have to do that. So perhaps be patient with the interviewers and just know that it's not perfect, and the interviewers aren't perfect. So again, the communication piece is going to be key.
Yeah, I'll reiterate what Chris said. I've been doing a few interviews, and it's definitely been challenging. I think my favorite interviews are definitely the individuals that are very transparent, cameras on, are willing to really jump in and have that conversation versus, just a simple phone screen. I feel like I really get to know the individual, especially in a pre-sales role where those type of little nuances or mannerisms and how you react is pretty important to this role, right? Because you're in a sales role directly working with customers. I also liked Lisa's comment, right, of ending interviews the way that she does. That's exactly how I did it when I was interviewing. And there was a question that came in as a follow-up, how do you make sure that that doesn't come across cocky or entitled when asking that question? And I think you just have to, you have to phrase it in a certain way to be genuine, right? You're genuinely asking for feedback. And there were interviews where the response was excellent. Hey, you did great. Don't have any feedback. And there were a few interviews that gave me some very specific things to work on. That's how I learned and really got better, right, to nail that down for my next interview. I think it's a genuine question. It's, depending on the way you're phrasing it or framing it, shouldn't come across cocky or entitled.
So glad you brought up feedback. That was rolling right into my next question of how can a candidate take constructive feedback the best? I know that there are times where in the recruiting world, it's near and dear to our heart to never feel like we're ghosting a candidate or can never seem to be able to give that feedback just for whatever legality reasons and whatnot there are. But how would you recommend someone either asking for feedback, what to do once they have received constructive criticisms after their interviews, and how would you suggest for them pushing forward?
I can take that one. I obviously, like I said, right, I really like to do that. In my time at NetApp, I've been here for 3 years, and in those 3 years, I've been on a different team different role every year. So I've interviewed internally a lot and moved around a lot. In that process, I remember one time 2 years ago, I was interviewing for the cloud team, and I unfortunately did not get the role, right? I asked for some feedback. I got some really good constructive feedback on what to do. And the next time I got another opportunity to interview for that team, I nailed it. And that's a really good way of, during the interview process, like while I'm in there, so I'm not tracking down a recruiter or anything like that, I'm directly asking the person that is interviewing me, how did you think that went? What do you feel like you're looking for in a candidate or I should be doing to really fill this role and be successful in this role? And the feedback I got was around some presentation skills, slowing down during my explanation of X, Y, and Z. Like I was really talking to a customer, and I really took that to heart, practiced it. The next time I nailed it. And that's the way feedback should go, right? It's constructive. You took it well. It's genuinely something you can work on and practice. So the next time around, you can do that.
So there's an interesting aspect to immediate feedback, and there is a difficulty with that. Aside from legality, we all want to help the candidates. We all want to see them succeed. But we have to remember that the interview is structured usually multiple interviews in one day. And at the end of the day, everybody comes together to compare notes and see if there are emerging patterns and make a decision. So to give a feedback in isolation on one interaction is difficult, because it may be that this was a mishap and the rest of the team did not pick up on it or picked up the opposite. And therefore, we don't want to give a negative feedback or constructive feedback or whatever, or positive feedback with something that is not genuinely obvious throughout the day or throughout the experience. So there are reasons for withholding feedback. So the feedback can be really focused on the one interaction with that one person at that time, rather than the overall thing. And that is easy to see. You can look for subtle cues there. You can see if I, for example, if I see someone straying and going far away, I will interrupt them and saying, that's not what I asked. Here's what I'm asking for. That should be a feedback there, because it's saying the person did not hear the question clearly. Go back to the earlier comments, understand the question and make sure you're addressing it at the right level of depth and technical detail and all of that. So there are cues during the interaction that would give feedback for that particular interaction. For the overall experience, the best thing to do is, I usually do that at the end of the day. I schedule a 15-minute closure where I meet again with the candidate, and by then I have some input from my team members, and then I might give some hints in terms of how I think it went. Again, we don't want to be very specific, because we might still agree to not hire the person when we see someone maybe much better match for the position later. But I would give a closure. So you can ask for that closure at the end of the day. Pay attention to the titles, pay attention who's the hiring manager. And if you meet with those team members, with those people at the end of the day, you can probe a little bit and get some hints, maybe not direct feedback. I think to Amy's comment, internally, when we interview an internal candidate, it's easier to give candid feedback. But an external candidate, there are many reasons to hold back a little bit.
Ooh, we just had another really good question come through the chat. Do you mind if I take a crack at this one, Kristen?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the question is, I wanted to understand if during the experience, one feels more connected to a different role than they were hired for. How does NetApp help in this transition? Can one move between roles? I feel like this question was intended for me just because of my background. I came into this new hire program called the S3. I was actually originally hired as a technical support engineer, which is a post-sales support engineer. You're handling customer issues and tickets, and you're very much problem solving, that kind of role. And at the time when I was coming into the company, it seemed like a really good fit just due to my background, the work I did in school, and the internship experience I had. It aligned really well. So I spent about a year in that role, but very, very early on in my time in the company during this program, this new hire program, the Academy, I got exposure to what the support role looks like, what a solutions engineer does, and what sales and their function is. And during that time, I knew very, very early on that this role was what I wanted to be in, because I really, really liked the sales aspect of directly working with customers, having a longer term relationship. They're not just a ticket in my system. I wanted to own that relationship with customers. So NetApp was very, very willing to help. My manager was really incredible about it. I was very honest with her early on that this was the role that I wanted to transition into. So I was able to interview, and I became a solutions engineer. And then last year I became a solutions architect. So NetApp is a company I will definitely really, really promote for that, because they have not only helped me move once, but twice internally. So it's a great place to do that.
Yeah, to build off what Amy said, when I first became a manager back around 2008, one of the first employees in my organization just straight up mentioned to me that she's liked her technical role, but eventually wanted to move into product management. So here's a brand new manager faced with this employee that's, yeah, I'm here, but I want to move on to another role. So learning opportunity for me. I reached out to some of my other people, other cohorts, to see how they handle these situations, and got some good tips on how to help individuals set up and be successful to make these type of transitions. How can I get here more involved in things like product definition and things like that. And over the years, eventually, after a couple of years, an opening came around and she was able to move. And it actually feels pretty good as a manager to be able to help someone grow and move into something that they're really passionate about, kind of like Amy's experience. And it's just, again, it comes down to transparency and being open with your manager. A job isn't a perfect fit, but there's something else you're passionate about, you should definitely try to seek out and look for advice on how to move in there. Yes.
I would add two things to that. One, most managers I know at NetApp, they would rather lose you to another group than another company. And secondly,
Absolutely.
you start and you realize that maybe there's a different role you're interested in. That's what Lee Smith and the rest of the and the university recruiting staff is for. You can contact them and they will walk you through how to have that conversation.
Definitely. Awesome. I see you, Kathy. I promise I'm going to wrap right now.
Go ahead. Take your time. Take your time. I just wanted to hop in.
Thanks. So last things, I know that this slide has been up for the last few minutes, but I just wanted to let everybody know now what, as far as landing the interview, I feel we've covered a lot of this that's been listed here. One thing we haven't covered, making sure your LinkedIn profile is updated. Pretty please. Now that we are in a completely virtual world, it is definitely going to make an impact on being able to contact you and having some sort of email that we can reach out to you aside from LinkedIn. So please make sure your LinkedIn profile is updated. Always connect a few minutes early, especially in a virtual interview, just in case anything were to happen. In case internet seems faulty, you can always log off and log back in and be able to fix that before an interview starts. And remember to breathe. It is an interview. We have all been there. We have all been nervous. Please don't take it to that it's going to make you show or present badly. Just take a minute, take a deep breath, and then turn on that camera, and everything will go well from there. So really appreciate you guys coming into this session. It was such a joy. Thank you so much to all. Shout out to my partner in crime, Lee Smith, who's been in making sure that a lot of your questions have been getting answered while we've been presenting. So I'm really happy with how everything turned out today. Thank you guys so much.
Again, thank you, NetApp team. If we can give them virtual applause, you guys were so incredible. I'm going to be sending out a survey to all the attendees, and if you guys can fill that out and we can share your info, including a resume upload with Kristen and team, and so you can get more of that time, hopefully, with NetApp. And we have our resume winner is Glory Edidayo. Congratulations. We will be doing a resume review with you, and we will be in contact with you. Again, thank you to everyone who attended. We'll be putting up this recording in our URX for Students group on LinkedIn. So feel free, if you want to go back and see any of the advice that everyone here gave, you can go ahead and go back to that URX student group. Again, thank you so much, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks for the
Thank
time.
you guys. Have a great weekend.
Bye.